There had not been a time in recent memory when any had challenged the collective might of the Commonwealth. But as conflict engulfed the world, our enemies were foolish enough to bring aggression to our coastline.
Hi guys, Gaming Bear here, right for the next episode. Hearts of Iron, well, it's April 1936. And well, carrying this on, before we move into more of the production, I want to show you we have an inefficient resource situation. Now this, one of the key parts of the game, and with any Paradox game, is the resource management and the interaction with other countries. Now in this we need rubber plus, and we're short of chromium. Now you're thinking why? Well, rubber is generally to do with the manufacture of planes or possibly transport. Then the chromium is needed for ships and heavier tanks, that sort of thing. Steel is used in a lot of items, mainly tanks and ships and weapons, that sort of thing. Tungsten is generally used in either artillery or anti-tank guns, and the aluminium is normally used in planes. So let's have a look at some of the production and some of the situations. You can see the battle cruiser we've got is that it's being reduced in speed. We've got a lack of 4 units. But because we're producing 2, it's causing us an issue of a 2.5% modifier, so it's slowing down the production. And one of the issues is trying to match your resources to your production without having to trade for the resources of your opponents. Now what you get trading wise, you trade 8 units of something for 1 unit of production in trade goods, 1 factory, which you get on the construction side. These factories which you own can then be used, so we're using 15 for consumer goods because of the type of the way our government is running at the moment, and then we're putting some of these resources into producing more factories to then produce more resources. So it's a catch-22. If you haven't got the factories, you can't produce enough goods to trade to get what you need to produce. So smaller countries have a tricky situation moving into the industrialized age, whereas other countries like Germany start off in quite a strong position. So what we have is this trade ability, which allows us to trade in. So you can see we're importing rubber from Brazil, but we're not actually getting, or should be getting, 8 units, and we're not. So I think I should go for somewhere else instead, send that through, and actually when we've got the resources that we need, then stopping this coming through from Brazil. At the same time we are importing tungsten, which we're getting from Sweden, coming through. Tungsten is one of those useful items which you can actually see is coming in and is being used for equipment. We'll have a look at the artillery side of things and where this is used. Chromium is mostly used for ships or for high-end tanks. So you need these. The chromium is coming in from Turkey and from Sweden. You can see the amount of chromium. These units here, 70 units of tungsten. The steel, most industrialized nations have got it, so in quite large quantities. So normally steel isn't an issue. Then the chromium is very useful. There's more available over here. Small amount, 2 units here, and then with tungsten further up in Norway. Down here in Finland, 2 units of chromium. Over in Russia, 24 units of chromium near Murmansk. Coming down, 12 units in Oriel. Further down, 22 units. So there's not just the oil, but there's the chromium, which is very useful. And tungsten down here in Krasanda. So these items are very, very useful. These resources, not only does it boost your production, it stops your production from dropping, but by preventing these items from being used by your opponents, you're slowing down their reduction their resource generation and their production lines, which hampers their war efforts. Just the same as bombing their infrastructure, going in, destroying their supply routes, destroying their factories, you are hampering their war effort, which is why the planes. We'll have a look at some of the production and check out the planes and now the ships. You can see the need for chromium on this. Oil and steel for the destroyers and submarines. Looking at the tanks, standard ones are just steel and oil, but heavy tanks use quite an amount of chromium. Luckily, we have enough chromium to allow us to work this. So our production line is functioning quite efficiently at the moment, even though we need to retool it and it needs to get up to full efficiency. Our production line is pretty good because we've got the resources and we don't have to use some of our precious factories to get those materials. Looking at the other areas, now let's look at planes, including planes in this. So planes, see we need the oil, aluminium, which we've got. Rubber is the issue. Got enough for these, but tactical bombers are an issue that we need to address. Plus, we will need transport planes in the background and also strategic bombers. Tactical bombers actually go in and attack ground troops very, very neatly. The transport planes drop in paras. In the old versions of Hearts of Iron, you could actually supply troops in different areas which were out of supply if you had enough supply planes, but that doesn't seem to be working in this version like it used to. Strategic bombers attack infrastructure and buildings, roads, which stop them having the means of production, so you can slowly whittle away their ability to prepare for war and to continue a long protracted war against you as you're destroying their means of production in the background. So strategic bombing is a slower way of dealing with your opponents, whereas close air support gets in and destroys ground targets, destroys them, moves in and leaves the infrastructure in the background able to be used, so you then don't have to repair it when you capture the other country. So in a way it's good if you can get in, blitz them quickly. Lightning War. At this stage, the Germans hadn't even come up with the name Lightning War. I think it was it Goebbels who came up with the name as just as a name to explain what had happened. But it was just basically fast maneuver in, destroy someone, focus, Schwerpunkt, the point of impact, a point of force to break through and surround and then defeat the opponent. So these, at the moment, we are producing close air support. We are going to need naval bombers up around the coast because we don't have the production. Now, looking at these planes, the fighters, they have an 80% reliability. Close air, they'll be 80%. Tactical bombers, 80%. We need, before I start any new production lines, I would like to improve the capacity, the survivability of these planes, because 80% for me is just not good enough, and you want to be able to improve them. So what you do, click on the create variant, click it, and then you can click these buttons and improve the reliability. Each click is 25 points initially. The second click goes up to 55. So from 25, then 30. The next one is 35 points, and then up to the next one, 90 to 130. So it goes up to 40, and the fifth one goes up to 175. So you can see it's almost exponential, that each level is more expensive to do it. You get the reliability, and then you can balance it with the engine. So improve the engine, and let's get that right. So yeah, the engine will slowly improve the speed and the agility of the plane, whereas changing the range, you see that the reliability drops. We gain quite a range advantage on the planes, which allows them to function in a wider area. So you need less planes to cover a broader area, but the planes then become less able to take it, less reliable. But you can still do it. Improve the range by 2, and your reliability drops to 104. Up to 3, and it drops to 96. But your range you gain up to 910 kilometers. So it's an interesting change. Then you have the weapons. Weapons-wise, you lose a significant amount of reliability by improving the weapons. The speed drops, but the air attack and the agility go up. So you're making the plane better, but because it's better in some ways, it becomes less reliable, and you're more likely to lose them because of the reliability aspects. So you could improve the weapons, get a closer range plane, improve it so you're now in this situation where it had dropped reliability to 80%, change the range down again to 96, so keeping the planes at the same range, but just improving the weapons means that you've got a better speed. The weapons in drops the speed. It increases the agility. Oh, hold on, let me get this wrong. Right, it improves the air attack. Let's go for this. Reduces the agility and reduces the maximum speed. But the weapons, these additional points, it may only seem like you're looking 5 to 10% improvement per notch that you're putting in, but that 5 or 10% can really make a big change in the battlefield. So agility will go up to 37, but you'd want to improve the engine to compensate. So the agility up to engine up to 1 puts the agility back up to now to 42.5, 45, 47.5, and back up to 50. So you've improved the weapons and balanced it with the engine, but your reliability overall has dropped. So it would have dropped from 100 down to 80, and you're back to 80% reliability, but better weapons, better engine, but with a standard range on the planes. So you can match all of these figures. So imagine if we didn't have the reliability boost, the reliability would be 40%. So there'd be a 60% chance of losing your planes in an engagement. Even though they would be far better at knocking out your opponents, you would more likely lose them because of these additional items that you put in. But you see, as we change these and drop the weapons and the engine, your reliability is going up towards 80%. There we go, and it's all back to normal just by changing these issues. So you can balance the reliability with the range, the weapons and the engine. I tend to go for more reliability because there's less chance of them being knocked out in when they're moving around, when they're being transported through bad weather. You could be losing planes just in bad weather. So the more reliable the planes are, you can take attrition from just the weather. So irrespective of anything else you do, even without enemy action, you can be losing planes. At the same time, you will have the reliability issues like the light tanks, 80% reliability, and you can do a similar thing with the reliability, up the reliability, then add some additional armor and it drops the reliability. Or if you improve the main gun, it drops the reliability. Improve the engine, you lose a bit, but you gain a bit of speed, but the reliability drops. Oh no, it doesn't. No, not with the engine. Just the speed changes. That's the only one. The engine and armor affects the reliability of the Panzer ones. The heavy tanks. So we'll bump up the reliability to 5. Change the armor, and you can see the reliability dropping as you increase armor up towards 80 or 90%. pretty useful. The gun, improving the gun, drops the reliability, but improves the hard attack and piercing, so that's quite useful earlier in the game. The engine for this, we can see that the reliability is staying the same, but the speed is improving up to a whole 6 kmh from 5, so it's not, the heavy tanks early in the game for Germany aren't the best. So this is what you need to balance with your heavy forces, your planes, to allow you to get to the end game. Now we've got army experience, which I'd want to be putting in to upgrade some of these tanks. Now you're thinking, okay, what are you going to be using the most of? Well, for the point of attack to push through, the strong heavy tanks are, let's have a look at the numbers, bear with me. So clicking over, army wise, light tanks, well at the moment we don't actually have any heavy tanks in any divisions. We need to be producing them. So the production side, clicking this off, looking at the tanks, we will be producing 1.7 a week. So we want something quite reliable. The light tanks will be producing more of, and more of them will be being destroyed. But at this stage, heavy tanks, yes, they can take more damage, but because of their unreliability, and because we're likely to be having as we have a look at the construction side, looking at the tanks, it's going to be 1941 before we get to upgrade to the Tiger. So these gross tractor heavy tanks are going to be in existence for a number of years. We're looking 7 years-ish. So from 1934 through to that. So even though it's 1936, so let's say 5 years. Another 5 years before we change these heavy tanks. So 5 years, better to have a reliable tank. Whereas the Panzer II is going to be superseded very, very quickly. The light tanks will keep producing, but we'll need to supersede what we use in battle from the light tanks to the medium tanks in the short term compared to the long term. So by making the gross tractors more reliable, they've got to serve for longer in the background, so having a long-term reliable tank. So the first one you go for is the heavy tanks, because the heavy tanks are going to allow you to push in and attack your enemy very, very neatly in the background. And you won't have then wasted this additional chromium, which you normally have to buy in to get. Whereas the oil you can make yourself, the steel you've got with the light tanks, so you're not losing the production. Because if you've had to spend these additional resources, and which costs you resources and factory units to buy in, and if you then just throw them away because they're only 80% reliable, you're on a loser anyway. So better to have a reliable heavy tank initially, and then make the Panzers more reliable, then make the planes more reliable as you go through. So the BF-109s start off at 80% reliability. All of these as you work through start off at 80%, and it's down to you to make them more reliable as you go through, so you don't have the attrition factor for just having a force in the field just being destroyed purely for the reason that you haven't changed the design to actually function. So you're defeating yourself part of the way through. And I know it's pedantic, but it's these little things which can just give you the edge in the long term. That 20% of the heavy tanks that by 1941, which you would have lost in the background, so average, moving them around, things have happened, they're breaking down, you're losing 20% of them. Can you imagine if by 1941 you've got 20% more heavy tanks, 20% more light, medium tanks, then you come to the planes. You're not having your planes falling out of the sky, so they're not there for the battles in the end, when you really need them. So you're defeating yourself not by putting the research in, whereas manpower, the men, upgrading the units, certain things can actually affect it. So templates, at the moment we've got support artillery and engineering company. Now the support artillery, the more you put in, let's have a look at the research side. So coming in, as we haven't really looked at the artillery generally, you can see it's using tungsten here as the main force to basically to produce shells and gun components. The same with the anti-tank and the anti-air on the other side. This just uses steel. Further down, I thought it uses tungsten. No. So the flak only uses steel. Hasn't got such great penetration. That's another reason why it hasn't got such great penetration. So tungsten is used for these artillery units, anti-tank, artillery, anti-air. I sort of think artillery. Then you've got the rocket units, which also use tungsten. So all of these use tungsten, and these can be worn out in the background. Whereas your normal troops, as they're going in the field, normal infantry don't wear out. This equipment, like the SDKs, use steel and rubber. These can wear out. 80% reliability. So you want to use things at the right time. The Opal Blitz, 80% reliability. These things will wear out. So in a way, the less you do, the less you move them, the less chance of them breaking down, but they will still break down. So you've still got an attrition factor that you need to try and get around. So whereas your normal infantry, they haven't got an attrition factor. Men generally aren't just going to die without someone shooting them or surrounding them, sinking their transport, blowing them up with bombs. So you've got to balance the resources that you've got in the background with what you're going to be using, how you're planning for the future, what planes you're going to put in, how many are going to be flying and falling out of the sky that you don't need to just use in the background. So, which is another reason why I brought the planes in, took them out from these regions, binned them so they're there in the background, ready to use when I want them. And they're not flying around, and they're basically just mothballed and not being used. Similarly, you can get the equipment in place. You can see there we go, no templates, heavy tanks. By having them in the background, not in templates, you're protecting them in a mothballed state without them taking any damage in the background, that they're not just breaking down, things aren't happening. It's only when you bring them out of mothballs, it's only when you put them into units that they then start taking an attrition factor. So you want to be able to save these units for when you need them. The same with the planes and the ships, preferably. So as you can see, the ships are similar. So we'll go to the research side, looking at the ships, so I can demonstrate that each of these forces, like these have got a reliability of 85%, which is pretty good. Coming through, reliability 85. Then we get the Narvik 90%, and then later 92% with the level 4s. So you can see as you get towards the end, the ships become much more reliable, and you can factor those things in. So let's have a look at some of the ships that we're actually using in the background, production wise, ships, and say let's go for the destroyers. You don't have the chance of improving them, so that's one issue. The light cruisers, you can actually improve the reliability. So as you get to the upper levels, you can be creating ships which are so reliable that they're only going to be destroyed or only going to founder when they get attacked by the enemy. They're not just going to drop. You won't get an attrition rate. They're not just going to stop working and then you've got to replace them. So it's things like that you've got to watch out for. So if you're putting a fleet out to sea that's 80% reliable, you're going to be losing those ships just because they're out there, just because they're being worn out in the background while you're just dealing with normal things. It sounds a bit silly to talk about it at this stage, but if you're not thinking along those lines at this stage, then when it starts happening, you won't notice. You won't be thinking, oh, what can I do to address this? You won't realise earlier enough to actually get on with it and to think, okay, what can I do? It's little percentages this way, that way, or the other, which allows you to get the edge. If you've lost 20% of your forces, basically, and your opponent has been careful with their forces and brings them in at that critical moment, that 20% difference on the battlefront can mean the difference between winning and losing. Whereas if you've been conserving your equipment, you then modify, because what you can do in the background, you recruit the unit. These units have got this equipment in the background. So, okay, they've got the standard equipment, but the support equipment uses artillery, and that has got a reliability amount. So you'll be using up artillery pieces which are 80% reliable for doing nothing. The SS divisions, you'll be using motorised artillery for possible just losing it in the background for no reason. Then with the panzer divisions, putting them in, you've got artillery, you've got these motorised, you've got light tanks, all being used in the background with no, and they're just falling in the background, and you don't know why. You're losing forces, you've got an attrition rate, and then we come to the training. In the background, you've got even more of an attrition rate. You click on the unit and then go to training. These guys are at regular level. They don't need training. But you can get a unit of new troops, click them training, and then suddenly that attrition rate is kicking in, and you're losing potentially 20% of the equipment and the manpower as they're in training, as if they're in a war situation. And this is what you need to watch out for, or at least be aware of and factor in. So the more technically advanced a unit is, you get them on training, you're using up more equipment. Your logistics screen, you'll see the numbers going from a positive situation to potentially a negative situation depending on your production. The production side varies. At the moment it's 3.7 here, 52.5. These numbers vary because it's a malleable production. It's not set. That's it. It's your country's whole industry, and it changes. And this is roughly what you're getting at any time, and these figures will be changing on a daily basis depending on what your production lines are doing and what's happening to your industry, whether it's being bombed or other factors. So that's where we start off. So we want to get the most reliable planes and ships that we can in the background. We have 10 points of army experience that we can use, so we want to make certain tanks the most reliable. So heavy tanks, clicking into the heavy tank, as we've got only recently started the production line. Heavy tanks A, boom, that's it. 10 points, reliability up to 88%, boom. So this is instead of the gross tractor A, and it's denoted with a green dot saying that it's it can be decommissioned and taken away, but at the moment we want to use it. So we'll click that, and it's just changed what we're producing from the gross tractor to the gross tractor A, and instead of from this 80% reliability up to 88%. So every time it does something, it sort of rolls in the background, and there's an 88% chance of it not failing, whereas so it drops it from 20% failure chance to a 15%, and it significantly skews how things go in the background. So that's where we are at the moment. So we'll keep this rocking and rolling, speed this up in the background, and get the troops ready to do what they need to do. Now, actually, so we want to get the the troops being produced in the background, recruited. There we go. Mechanized electrical in the background. Now, to get as much computing and as much information going through and as much research, mechanical computing helps speed things up, whereas radios help you reinforce more quickly. Well, this is something we can do later. Yes, building radio and radar detection, very useful. It doesn't help at this stage. Mechanical computing does. So keep that rocking and rolling. And now we've got a chance to modify the government. First thing we want to do is get more organisation. So coming down, the industrialists, and as I was saying, the silent workhorse like Rudolf Hess, get him in, and it bumps up the percentage. So the political change is 1.8 per day. So that's the first change, that's him in, and that'll bump our numbers over time. So get it in early, and that will give us more political power over time. That 15% plus the other bonus of plus 15% as well when we get the other guy will just keep things rocking forward and allowing us to advance and be on point when we need to. There's now another issue. Oh, you're like, Gaming Bear, what's with all this information? It's all these little things which come in to help make things that little bit better. So looking at where we are with the planes and the tanks. So coming down to the research side, clicking on this, you've got a chance of improving and getting better designs for light aircraft, Junkers medium aircraft, or dive bombers, close assault craft, then medium aircraft, heavy and naval designs. So it depends what you need at any time. And one of the key things is to match what you're producing with, match the design with the tanks that you're getting in the background. At the moment, we don't have any tanks or planes training. Going for the Messerschmitt designs, when you design a new tank or a new plane, so this would give it 10% additional 10% agility, 10% to speed, and lower the research time by 10%. So if you have 150 points, click on this, it'll give you those bonuses. Looking at the production side, we have the BF-109, it's already produced. The design is produced. Switching over to light planes at this stage wouldn't improve this design. Upgrading the design wouldn't change it, wouldn't give it the boost, that 10% boost from having that designer, because this plane itself was designed by someone else. But if we then went to the research side, clicked in the planes, went to a new design like the AR-197, had that designer in place while this was being researched, then all of those bonuses would come in to the production of this one, and you would always have it on this model. But at the same time, if you then designed the Dornier 22, the FI-167, which is the Dornier version to go on a carrier, you design this, you won't get the bonuses because it's not a fighter, it's a seaplane. So one interesting way is to get what you really need at the beginning are the really good fighters, or for Germany, close assault planes. So the fighters, giving you fighter cover, which will boost your battlefield performance by about 15% just for controlling the battlefield, let alone for the damage that these planes will give you. And we already have the 1936 design. So you can potentially, what I would do is work down one branch to get these two designs, or this design and then the naval version of it, the carrier base version, and potentially one or two other versions, before I then switch over to, say, the Junkers and then later for the seaplanes versions. So go from the Junkers. So looking at the design, the aircraft design, start off with a light aircraft, then go to the Junkers close assault, which will give you close assault planes. Those three, one for the standard version being put onto the aircraft carrier, and then the next two versions being the standard one and the upgraded 1940 version, which would then give you improved light aircraft. Later we'd move over to the close air design, and then after that we would either go for the medium aircraft, which I would say is these are the longer range bombers, and then the Heinkel heavy bombers. The naval designs put these in for the variants to go on board a ship. So these are what you need to look at to go for the naval side. On the tank side, you've got a couple of options. Porsche gives you more armour, lower research time, and a better heart attack. Henschel, I like the reliability. So the reliability means you don't lose so many tanks. You can still bump up the armour, whereas with the Porsche design, you can bump up the design and get a little bit of reliability, but it's very well. It's a really tough tank. So you need to balance what you want out of the tanks, and then the next designs that are coming through, and which one you're going to go for. But you could say go for, say, the soft attack with these reliable and soft attack. Well, the soft attack plus 5%, you put in a mandate. So you start off with these Porsche, start off with the Henschel, which is faster. So you've got a faster tank design. The research, go into the tanks. So we've got the Panzer IIs. These units have got speed of 12. Different terrain reduces this, but if you've got a faster tank initially, you can then bump up, produce either the Leopards or the Panzer III, which will improve its speed from to around about 8.4 kmh. It's almost half a kmh more. But if your opposing number can't keep up with you as they break through, they can only do 8 kilometers an hour. You can do 8.5. Your tanks are outpacing theirs, and you're able to get away. You've got the breachhead. You're through their units. They can't catch up with you, and suddenly the blitzkrieg is working. That's one thing you've got to think of. Later, as you switch the designs, the Gross Tractor and these designs, you would want something a bit heavy, reliable and heavy, to be able to soak up the punishment. The same with the Tiger. They're slow, 6 kmh. The additional 5% is neither here nor there, but the reliability is. So you want to balance what you need from it and what you want from the armour and the piercing, whether you want which combination of those you actually want at which time to maximise the use of those 150 political power to do it. So you've gone for the faster tanks. You then want something a little bit more aggressive. So you bump over to the man unit, which gives you the Guerrilla artillery piece, which gives you soft attack of 56 plus 5%. So you're looking 58.5. Those additional percentages means that you can destroy more men on the ground and reduce the opponents you're facing. Tanks on their own, without infantry support, are useless. They're easily wiped out. So by bumping up these numbers, you get into a battle situation. The artillery and these fast-moving artillery guns, these guerrilla pieces, then later the Hummels, 72% plus 5%, so put up to 73.5 or so, will allow you to destroy just that little bit more, 5% more infantry, and to break through just that little bit quicker and then hit the open ground. So working between these, the normal Panzers, which can take out normal hard tanks, and then keep the speed going, break through, and to allow you to work. Whereas the Tigers, get them in place. They need the power, they need the breakthrough, they need to be able to just slam in, open the front. It was like the concept of the British with the cruisers and the cruiser tanks to exploit the breakthrough. But you had to have the breakthrough in the first place. So starting off with the really heavy tanks like the Churchill to slam in, open the breach, or like the Matilda II, which could just take on the enemy, which had approximately 70 to 75 millimeters of armour, which is the equivalent, well, like these Pak 37s, piercing 75. Well, the Pak 37s found it difficult to actually get through the armour of the Matilda, even at the beginning of the war, but there weren't enough Matildas, they weren't in the right places. The French tanks were good, but the tactics of the Germans worked really well. These anti-tank guns are pretty good, but if they came up against, like you saw, the 110 or 111 armour, they wouldn't have a chance. 1940 with the Pak 40, 88 millimeters of penetration. Get through normal tanks, but they wouldn't get through the Tiger. So you've got to wait until somewhere between 1941, 1942 and 1943, 108 mil of piercing for the Pak 44. Not quite enough to pierce the skin of the Tiger. But the Tiger is there on its own. It needs some infantry support, and the infantry support lowers its overall armour value. So a unit with more Pak 44s later could take down the Tiger tank, but they would have problems. As you can see, the soft attack 4, they would have problems taking out the infantry, and it's the infantry which is the key to winning the engagement. So you've got to balance the armour with protecting your infantry against the artillery. These units coming in, the 10.5 centimetre can do 24 points of soft damage. Later, this goes up to 32, plus a 10% bonus, then another 10% bonus, and in 1942 you got the Cannon 18, which is doing 40 points of damage, plus an additional 10% a year later. So you're seeing 45 points of damage at that point, going straight into a unit. Well, if you're looking at a unit that's got 100, 200 points, this artillery alone is doing an eighth of that damage. It doesn't sound like a lot. 12%, 12 to 15%. Well, you are looking a lot of damage that these can do, and so the stripping away the manpower decimates units and causes them to fall back. So this is, as they used to say, artillery is the king of the battlefield, and it's still basically the same, but you need to bring those forces to bear, and with the firepower, like we can see from the planes. So bring the combination of the artillery, the Junkers 88 with ground attack, 10 points of ground attack. So say 40 points from the cannons, 10 points from the planes, plus whatever the infantry and the tanks bring to slam in to destroy the unit in front of it. All combined arms theory, and boom, you have a winner. Winner, chicken dinner. And that's what we're going for. That's the fundamentals. That's how this system works. It's a very advanced system, but you need to learn the layers and how things start to interact. There's no right way, no wrong way, but it's a complex beast. I've played over 3,000 hours of this, and I'm still learning. And there's so much to it. I really I love this game. Not just this version, the earlier versions I don't play anymore. But there we go, you see these guys moving into position, see them moving across. Planes in reserve, ready to rock and roll. The surplus is here. Let's drop that down, we don't need so much. Let's get So Brazil still giving us a small amount. Let's drop that to 0. Boom. So we get that factory back. Anything else? No, that's fine. No, we need a little bit of chromium. Let's look at the construction and premium side. So we've got 11 factory units. We need more that we can use. Let's have a look at what we can actually produce in the background. Now we have a lot of aluminium, a lot of steel, rubber we are okay with, even oil. So we can produce tungsten steel. Chromium is the only thing we really have an issue with. So the production side, let's look at everything and work towards maximizing what we have and what we need. So we are short of light tanks. Oil and steel, fine. Heavy tanks, we could try and produce more, but we're balancing. This is a nice production number, and as we've got the more advanced gross tractor, 88% reliability, let's just keep that ticking over. The infantry equipment, we're short 15,000 units, but it only uses steel, so that's quite useful. Support equipment, very useful. We use tons of it, quite literally. Towed artillery, we are short of. Motorised, we're short of. 80% reliability, but you can't do anything about the reliability. The fighter planes, we can work on more of these and produce more of these. We have some surplus rubber, which we're actually that's about to drop, so we get one factory back. So let's move these back down to 1. Tactical bombers as 1. So the rubber from these planes, we're not bumping up. We're just going for a slow improvement because we're going to improve the models, and we're then going to have to supersede the older units, which, if we don't supersede them, are going to wear out more quickly anyway. The subs in the background, they're going to wear out, but we need them, so this is quite a nice number. The destroyers, the battle cruisers, they're all ticking over, and we're short. If we bump up this side, the battle cruisers, we will just be losing these over time with attrition. So for now, let's bump up the military infantry equipment and support equipment for what we need. Now the tungsten, let's have a look at the numbers of the amount of tungsten. We have plenty of tungsten. So towed artillery is something we can go for. We can create a stockpile of tungsten, of artillery, because this is something that isn't costing us to have hanging around, because we're not losing percentages of production because we have these materials already, whereas the motorized is using up at the moment, well, rubber, which we don't have, and oil, which we're okay with, but we don't have a great deal. And so it's looking at what you can produce, which is why, in the background, which is why one of the reasons that Germany had more tanks, because they had the resources. Let me just have a look. The materials here, like the tungsten here and chromium, that we could actually use, and in other parts of the country. Whereas over in America, conversely, coming down, you see large amounts of aluminium, but the ships were made with a lot of aluminium, but what you see a lack of is got some tungsten, but short of chromium. There's 2 units of chromium here. America is short of chromium, and so America has to import almost all of its chromium, and that's something you can bear in mind and try and work towards. If you can control rubber is a big one, but people can generally produce rubber. Chromium, on the other hand, reserves of chromium, like Poland doesn't have any. Coming down to these countries, that you don't find any until you come down to Bulgaria. This region is pretty good to capture because of the chromium. The same with the Baltic states, not the Baltic state, the Swedish states, the sort of Norse states. Pretty good for chromium. Coming down, you've then got these supplies, tungsten, but there's no chromium. France, no chromium, they've got to import it. So you can see, now Italy, more aggressive, it's got more chromium. Coming over to Africa, we're working our way down. Lots and lots of rubber, but only here, huge, Rhodesia, huge amounts of chromium, and especially down here in Africa, 168 units of chromium. And so we either have to, South Africa, 80 units. This chromium is a war winner for the British. Further afield, so let's look for huge quantities of chromium. India has got, in comparison, it's not large, but it's still a large quantity. Russia, large quantities of chromium coming through these areas, large volumes. So different countries have got different. The chromium is a key factor in the production of any war materials, of the really strong war materials. And over towards Japan, they've got tungsten but no chromium. There we go. Sorry, 88 here. Yes, they do have a nice supply of chromium, which we could possibly share with and trade for to give them production. But it means it's got to travel all the way through, and if we don't control this zone, this will be shut off from us. The trade which did go through and then past Gibraltar would have to go down all the way around underneath South Africa, back up the coast, and around past the United Kingdom to arrive here for us to use. That's not really going to work. You want short supply routes with countries you can either control or with people with not a great deal of distance between you and those resources, so they can be shipped, say from a port here, straight down, or from this port down, or from here, probably from here as it's near the resources, Lapland, and straight down. So you need to control the Baltic Sea to allow these resources to get to you. It's as simple as that. But the movement of those materials, as we can see, the United Kingdom's only got 2 chromium. A lot of tungsten, but chromium is an issue, and they're going to have to get it from Norway or Sweden, the same as America. So that's where it's a war of economics, of who can get the advantage in so many factors. It's really, really brilliant. So we'll carry on with that. I'll try and move things forward and show you the next stages. These are showing the underlining fundamental principles behind the game of what's happening, how things interrelate to each other, so you can keep those in your mind as to what you want to use. You've then got the geopolitical aspects, the interpersonal, and the ideological changes that you impart on other nations. I may go into that in the next episode, but for now we'll leave that there. Put a pin in it. There's so much, there really is so much. You look at it and it seems like a simple game. On the surface it's a simple game, but it's got so much depth to it, which is why I love this game so much. So yeah, see you soon. Have a great one.